Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. My name is Brooke Brzezowski, and I'm a public affairs advisor here at the Pentagon. I'll be moderating today's discussion with our two guests, General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., the 22nd Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and General J. Raymond, our first Chief of Space Operations for the U.S. Space Force. Our hope today is that this event offers our senior leaders a chance to take questions from airmen and guardians and share their perspectives on a topic of importance to all of us. I'll do my best to keep an eye out on the questions and comments as they come in, and we ask those who are listening in to use your first name and location if you have something that you'd like to share. While we know the comments today will be coming in and there may be an abundance of them, we want to let you know that we do have leaders who are watching and who are using this as an opportunity to grow in their own awareness of challenges that you may or may not be facing, or that other airmen and guardians might be. So please, looking forward to taking this opportunity, and I'm going to turn it over to General Brown for opening comments, followed by General Raymond. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brooke, and Jay, I appreciate you joining me for this very special opportunity to discuss this particular review. You know, last summer the Air Force directed a review, and I do see it as an opportunity, because I really do not think that our Air Force has ever asked our airmen about their personal experiences, or have we reviewed the data as directly as this. I know in my career, the 35 years that I've served, I don't recall being asked at this level, or I've ever read such a complete survey of our airmen and guardians and civilians' experiences and their views on race. The report reviewed about 8 years of Air Force data for differences between African-American airmen and guardians and civilians, other diverse groups in our Air Force. It looked at military justice and discipline, promotion and development opportunities, and career opportunities. In addition to the survey, a survey was conducted as part of the research, and we asked for the unvarnished truth, and we got it. And so thanks to all of you that responded. There's 123,000 airmen, guardians, and civilians that responded to the survey, 27,000 single-space pages of comments, 138 talks with airmen at 20 different locations across the Department of the Air Force. We hear you loud and clear. We're doing this Facebook Live event today to be open and transparent. We confirmed through varying degrees of disparity in important areas of military justice and discipline, where in this case, African Americans are overrepresented. For development and career opportunities, African Americans are underrepresented. From the report and the survey confirmed, the data confirmed what our airmen perceive. It also tells me we have work to do, work that we have to do together. As I said, what's different about this report and the disparity that we found out? I did say we found some disparity. We also found some areas where there weren't any significant disparity in accession, retention, and enlisted PME access. But what's different about this report? There are some differences. Realizing that we have looked at various reports, and this report looked at reports all the way back, 23 different reports dating back to 1973. This report does three things. It gave airmen a voice, guardians a voice, and our civilians a voice. It gives leaders insights into what our service members perceive and how they feel about racial disparity. It also gives our senior leadership insights into the next steps. And we started working in many of these areas to investigate the root cause and provide updates. In military discipline, we're expanding to examine all disparities by race and gender, and we're collecting more comprehensive data. On personal development and career opportunities, we're looking to improve culture, increase diversity, and measure progress. And in the area of trust, when it comes to the IG, equal opportunity programs, and our commanders, trust is earned by actions. We can't just talk the talk. We have to walk the walk. We have to ensure our leaders and commanders have the training, experience, authority, accountability, and responsibility to ensure that all of our members can reach their full potential. Now, these changes won't happen overnight, and we will not rush to failure. We'll be open and transparent as we proceed to make meaningful, measurable, and sustainable improvements that will endure across the Air Force and the Space Force well after I'm retired, and well after many of you have all retired and gone on to other parts of your life. And so thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I'm looking forward to the questions, and I'd like to turn it over to General Raymond.
General Raymond, I think you're muted.
Thanks a lot, General Brown, and I know you and I feel very passionate about this topic, and I look forward to working shoulder to shoulder with you in responding to the survey that and the review that was done. I want to start off up front saying thank you to all the Guardians and all the airmen that participated. As General Brown mentioned, there's over 123,000 responses to this survey. And I will be very clear, as General Brown was, your voice was heard, and we greatly appreciate you being candid with us in that feedback. Secretary Barrett, General Goldfein, and I signed a document to establish this report. And we did so because we knew just how important diversity and inclusion is to our service. In fact, it's a national imperative, a national security imperative, and I really believe it's a readiness issue. I think that our forces are more ready when everybody that comes to work, regardless of race, color, sex, creed, or religion, feels welcome and has an environment of which they can flourish across all of our ranks. And it is clear in this report that the data shows that some members of our African-American airmen and guardians in our force have seen disparity. I will tell you, though, this report is only the beginning. It provides the data which we so need to be able to get our arms around the challenges that we face, and provides us with opportunities going forward. I know General Brown and I are committed to taking that next step to get to the root cause of these issues. We're committed to having an enduring dialogue, and as mentioned by Brooke, we're not going to get to every question, but again, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to have this dialogue, and I'd encourage you to have your voices continue to be heard. We all take the same oath, and we're all taking an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And each of you deserve the greatest opportunity for development and leadership opportunities. As we look at building a space force, building an inclusive and diverse space force is a priority for us. We have built a human capital management plan for this new service that allows us to assess, develop, and retain folks from all sectors of our country, and making sure that we have people in the right place at the right job to do what is so nationally important, our mission. So again, thank you very much for putting your voices into this discussion. We value your voices. We don't have all the answers. I'm going to tell you that right up front, but we're going to do a lot of listening today. We're going to squint with our ears, and we're going to have a conversation with you. And there's a lot of work to be done. And I will tell you, I'm committed to working side by side with General Brown and with our secretary to have these hard conversations and make meaningful changes for our force. And with that, I really look forward, Brooke, I'll turn it back to you. I really look forward to having a good session on question and answer dialogue.
Thank you both. As the questions are kind of coming in and we're sorting through them, a lot of our airmen and guardians haven't had a chance to probably thoroughly read the 150-page report as it was placed online yesterday. Both of you probably have more than once. I'm curious what both of your thoughts were when you first read the report, and maybe what your thoughts are today. You've kind of outlined those a little, but when you first read it as a senior leader, what was going on in your mind, General Brown?
Well, I have read it several times. I've probably read it 5 to 6 times, cover to cover, all 150 pages. I wasn't necessarily surprised by some of the information that was in there, because as an African-American officer, some of the perceptions that were laid out in the data, but also what our airmen and guardians and civilians responded with, is things I've actually felt. I also see it as I looked at it, is this is an opportunity that we actually have not only the perceptions from our service members, but we also have the facts to back it up, to say that there are some disparities. And I see this as an opportunity. We can't be in a state of denial that it's all things are good and there is no disparity. The data bears it out. And so I really saw this as an opportunity now as we go forward. But I also saw that there's a lot of work that we have to do in order to make the change that we need to make. Now, the other aspect I would also say is the fact that it also talked about the other 23 other reports that have been done since 1973. it's disappointing. That's the part I was disappointed about. The fact that we studied this problem before and really haven't done anything. And that to me is the disappointing part. And so this is something that I think I'm committed to. I know General Ramey's committed to make our Air Force and our Space Force better.
Yeah, I would just add on, I agree with the opportunity. I think the thing that I was so thankful for was that so many airmen and guardians threw their voice into the conversation. Those voices are going to make us better. That data is going to help us make meaningful change. It shows we've got a lot of work to do, but we're committed to doing it. And when I read it, I was glad that we kicked off the review, and I'm glad we have the data that's going to support, again, making that meaningful change.
Joe Cheney, he asked, what took so long to release this report? Did it have something to do with outside influences, or this report began in June? Why now?
Well, the thing I looked at is, I think we both highlighted the fact of the overwhelming response. So we started this survey, and actually I was not in the job yet. I was still at PACAF as a commander PACAF. But when we started this process and you start diving into it, and the responses that we had were pretty overwhelming. At the same time, what we don't want to do is just lay out a report and then you go, then what? And so as we took some additional time to go sort through the data, I'd encourage, as you read the report, to go back to the appendices at the back, because it talks about the things we're laying out and the steps that have been laid out and the parts of the Air Force that are responsible for some of those steps. And so I think the extra time we took to lay out not only the data, but also the initial steps, that you can actually see that there's some things that are already going on inside of our Air Force and our Space Force to make that change is important. And that's why it took a bit longer than we originally planned.
I've got nothing to add. I concur fully. When you have 123,000 folks respond, it takes time to get through that data. And this is more about getting it right than getting it fast.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next questions we're kind of getting, one from Tony Johnson. He said, will the IG and EO investigation process be evaluated as well? And a related follow-on from Chris Visconti is, what's the path forward? We have an EO department, but apparently that isn't working. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, so there's, what I would start off with is this as part of the report is also review how we do EO and IG, not only the process that we go through, but how we train those that are in these particular career fields. The one aspect I would highlight that is not actually highlighted in the report is actually that we've actually stood up an Office of Diversity and Inclusion that reports directly to the Secretary of the Air Force. And I tell you, just based on my experience talking to other African-American officers and NCOs, this is something they've been asking for, because we've had it bounce around inside of our Department of the Air Force, and now it's going to stick at the Secretariat level and report directly to the Secretary. And so that's important. I think the other part is how we as leaders, when I say we, I'm talking about all of us that are on this net or others, is how we as leaders lead to create the right environment so that you don't have to worry about going to the IG or EO, or decrease the number of those that have to go to IG and EO. And that may point out where there's a gap in the ability of the particular leader we're dealing with. And I think that's going to be some good feedback to us as well as to those particular leaders. Now, I'm sure General Ramey has maybe some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I do think this firmly falls in the lap of leaders. This is a leadership issue. We need to embrace it, leaders at all levels. We need to, as leaders, develop the environment where everybody can flourish. And then we need to have very strong mechanisms. We are best when we have a really healthy IG. And I'll tell you, we've got a great IG in Lieutenant General Saeed at the Air Force level, at the Department of the Air Force level. We're going to have to continue to strengthen the IGs at all levels and strengthen the EO process. That's going to be important. But I also firmly agree with General Brown that this is up to leadership to set this tone going forward.
Thanks, gentlemen. This question has come up a lot in a number of different forums. People have said General Brown is clearly an African-American four-star. How can you say that racial disparity exists when he's at the top? General Raymond, General Brown, do you want to?
Well, sure. I'm the first service chief in the military, and think about how long we've been a nation. We had a military, well over 240 years, and I'm the first. Probably not the first qualified, but the first to have the opportunity. And just because I'm here doesn't mean that's the end of the story. So who's next? Who comes behind me? Is it a woman that comes behind me? Is it someone of a different sexual orientation? Is it another diverse group? And so it can't be a one and done. And we can't slap the table and pat ourselves in the back now that I'm sitting here as the chief of staff. We got to keep pushing so that many other people have an opportunity to do exactly what I'm doing all across our Air Force and all across our Space Force.
Yeah, I would just add in that, the General Brown is the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force because he's the most qualified officer to be the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. It's not because of the color of his skin. He's an exceptional airman and an exceptional leader who has been given the opportunity to have jobs and grow into this business, and as we all have. And that's equal opportunity and inclusion. That's why this is so important. But you're looking at the best airmen to lead our service.
Pab Espin asks, will you also be looking at disparities for other ethnic and racial groups as well?
I would just jump in. As we said, this is a start. We had to have a sharp focus on the issue that was the most pressing at the time, but this is just a start. And we're going to use this data to fully inform in other areas as well. And as we continue these dialogues, I think there's clearly room to expand this as we go forward. But this is a great start. We look forward to using this data for a broader effect.
I would also add that we're already doing some of this, and having sat on the Diversity and Inclusion Council that was started under General Goldfein, and as my time at PACAF as the African American Senior Representative, and now as the Chief of Staff, to be able to as we take a look at not just African American, but we've looked at gender, we looked at other diverse groups, and look at their progression throughout our Air Force, both on the officer and enlisted side. So that work is ongoing. It wasn't necessarily the focus of this particular report, but it doesn't mean it's not part of what we're doing. It's on the mind of our leaders to ensure that we're looking across all the diverse groups across the Air Force and the Space Force.
Awesome. Thank you. Norris Lewis, he shared, how do we improve a culture when a person is constantly being told that an issue doesn't exist? I think both of you mentioned that you have the facts now, but facts may not be enough for some people who still don't see it and haven't experienced it. He shared, I left my previous assignment because of this issue and I'm still dealing with it. What would you tell someone like Norris?
Well, I think
one moment.
One of the things that I've actually found is for various leaders across the Air Force, and particularly for this particular questioner, there may be situations where your leadership was just unaware. And I'll, from a personal standpoint, after I did my video back in June, I had some of my mentors who do not look like me contact me or write editorials that they were completely unaware of what I was dealing with as an African American. And that's an aspect of this particular report, the dialogue that's happened over the course of the summer, all the small group sessions. Right now I'm on the road visiting airmen in the CENTCOM AOR, and matter of fact, I'm at Aviano right now. In talking to our airmen and hearing from them, the topics that they're able to talk about and open the awareness and the understanding is what's going to help. We probably weren't there before this report and before the events of this summer, but I think we're in a much better spot where we're talking about things that we would not have talked about in our Air Force or our Space Force before this summer. And that's what's going to help.
Yeah, I agree. I've had those similar dialogues across the Space Force. I think it's clear that not everybody's experiences are the same. It doesn't invalidate though what people are experiencing, and I will tell you the overwhelming response that we received to this review and the amount of data that we have clearly shows that we have some challenges and we've got some opportunities.
Thank you, gentlemen. I mean, I'm looking at some of the comments right now, and it looks like it continues to be questions about how has this been allowed to continue. I think General Brown mentioned, there have been 23 other reports at some point in time that have happened. What makes this time different?
I think what makes this one different is George Floyd. I mean, think about what happened that started, not only that, but just for all of us as a nation to see that. And then look at all the protests over the course of the summer. Okay, when those other studies were done, there probably weren't as many protests. Think about it, it was 1973 and beyond. So you didn't have a major national event that focused us on this particular topic until this summer. And that's what's different. The confluence of events. The events that happened with George Floyd, all the protests over the summer provides us an opportunity. And shame on us if we miss this opportunity to make the change that's required across our Air Force to make it better, whether it's the Air Force or the Space Force. That's what, to me, is what's different.
Yeah, I would add in what also makes a difference is we now have a significant amount of data that provides the foundation for going forward and making some meaningful change. I also think, I wouldn't say what makes a difference, but what I can tell you is that you have two leaders here that are committed to doing everything that we can, along with our secretary, to make that meaningful change. And with the voices that we've heard from across both the Air Force and the Space Force, and with the data that was collected in the review, and with leaders at all levels that will be engaged in this, and with an action plan that lays out milestones, I think I know I'm committed, and I know General Brown is to making a difference. Now, do we think we're going to fix it, if you will? This is not going to be something that is an overnight deal. This is going to take time. But I'm telling you that we're committed to working it hard and making sure that that we make some meaningful change.
Thank you. Another question that came in from Noel says, why is the focus of diversity efforts to achieve diverse officer leadership focused on pilot recruitment and retaining? Other AFSCs are already more diverse. Why not broaden the AFSC considered for key leadership positions?
Well, I think there's, go ahead.
No, go ahead, CQ. You got it.
There's two parts to this. And I'll just tell you, when I was a captain, I did an interview for Air Force Times. And it talked about the percentage of African Americans that were pilots. It was 2%. That was 30 years ago. You know what it is right now? It's still 2%. And there's certain career fields, not only in the Air Force, but the other services as well, that those are the career fields, mostly the operational career fields, that those are the folks that actually rise to the top. If you don't put candidates in those career fields, it's harder to actually get them to rise to the top. And the shape of the Air Force that it is today, will the shape of the Air Force change in the future as we look at other, as cyber information operations in other areas? I think it will, but it won't make a dramatic shift. And so you want to make sure that all of us have an opportunity, all the diverse groups have opportunities to be in key positions and compete in those positions that actually open the aperture for them to rise to the top. And that's why in the rated career fields for the Air Force, that's our initial focus in some areas, but it's really across the Air Force as well. One other thing I add to that is our developmental categories are also going to help us with how do we manage that diversity on the officer side? And there's aspects of that on the enlisted side based on how we do their promotions as well. Jay?
It is more than just a pilot problem. It's an operational career field challenge. We find the same thing on the space operations side as well. There's an underrepresentation of people of color in our operational career fields. The other thing that we're seeing is in our business in the Space Force, it's a science, technology, engineering, math, and there's an underrepresentation of, for example, females in STEM career fields. So one of the things that we're doing is we build this human capital plan to develop this new service, is looking at ways to assess early on a more diverse workforce in those areas that are traditionally underrepresented. Because as General Brown said, if you look at then how that progresses throughout the career field, throughout the course of a career, you need to have those folks to be able to build those into the senior leaders that we need.
Gentlemen, one of the questions we got as a kind of a follow-up to this is Carolyn Booker says, what about civilians? And this one's obviously personal, right? Like, your civilians are often in defense for an unknown amount of time, and there is no time limit to moving them or assignments. What do you do for civilians who face racism, or civilians who may be biased and don't know it? What about that?
Well, first of all, our civilian workforce is absolutely critical to us. On the space side, our Space Force this first year is going to be about 16,000 people total. 10,000 of those are civilians that are assigned to the Space Force. And so this is not just an active duty problem. This is a total force problem, active duty and civilian. And the plans that we're developing on the Space Force side address that human capital development of all, because everybody's equally important.
Yeah, so for the Air Force, a good portion of our civilian force is in Air Force Materiel Command. And I was just up at the Wright Pat and sat down with General Bunch, and I will tell you, when you look about diversity and inclusion for our civilians, he's at the forefront. And so he's taken a hard look at how we look at civilian career fields, in addition to our senior civilian leaders from that aspect. One of the things he started that we did not have before is, we have a status of discipline, so we can look at the disparity or talk about the disparity or how we're doing discipline. And many times we do status of discipline, we're looking at the metric of how fast we get things taken care of versus in some of the demographics. We don't do that on the civilian side. So he started a civilian status of discipline, so you can actually highlight the fact that there may be some areas within his command where there are maybe some biases, and where there's different locations, different particular career fields, on how we're disciplining and or taking care of our civilians in their progression. And so we're taking some initial good steps that we never really put into place. We had it for the uniform side, but not so much on the civilian side. And so it's an opportunity for us to improve in that regard.
Thank you. Yvette asks, what is the fix when people joining the military from different backgrounds already have left opinions? We can't teach people to not be racist. We recently had a tech sergeant who led airmen while an active member of a white supremacist group. What do you tell airmen who've had similar experiences like this? Or airmen and guardians, sorry about that, General Raymond.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to hear about it. Okay, we shouldn't tolerate that type of leadership, particularly at the NCO level in our Air Force or our Space Force. But the other thing I often think of, I've been thinking about this for a while, and this is partly because I have a conversation with one of our major command commanders. And there's a program he did, and he talked about, when we deploy different locations, we'll do cultural awareness training. But we don't do cultural awareness training when you come into our Air Force or our Space Force. And when you come into our Air Force or our Space Force, this may be the most diverse experience you've ever had. If you grew up in the inner city, or you grew up out in on a farm, you may have a completely different experience where this is the first time you've actually engaged with somebody of a different diverse background. And how do we prepare you for that? Just because you finish, basic training, go to OTS, finish ROTC at the academy, it doesn't automatically say that you've dropped all those biases that you had when you grew up or the experiences you had. How do we make that part of your development when you come into our Air Force? It doesn't stop in your session program. It's how do we actually work that throughout all levels of our Air Force, which is why this dialogue that we're having on this particular review is so important. But there's certain things we should not tolerate. And that to me is one of the things where we as leaders have to call it out. And for our airmen who feel that they're under that pressure, they should feel free to speak up and make it known so we can actually address that issue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also think that, when airmen and guardians get into their squadrons, again, leadership matters here, and it's our values. It's what we value as a service. And I think I couldn't agree more with what General Brown said.
Nicole Evans asked, how do you advise we encourage our commanders or leaders to speak more on this topic without overstepping? We need more participation in some of our units, particularly when we're too busy hacking the mission to stop talk, leaving many feeling sidelined.
I think there's a balance. I think, the way that I look at this is that this is imperative to our mission readiness. And it's not the only thing that's imperative to our mission readiness. There's lots of things that are imperative to our readiness, but this is clearly one of them. And as commanders of units that are charged to build the readiness of their service, of their units, this needs to be part of the conversation. Can't be the only part, but it needs to be part of it.
I was just talking to one of our commanders recently, and one of the things this commander spoke about was the fact that as they were having some of these small group conversations, they were involved in the beginning and they stepped away because they felt like they were overstepping. And their airmen came back and told that individual they were kind of missing the fact that they weren't there because they felt leadership wasn't interested or wasn't listening. So this commander got back involved into the small group discussions. And I think the key aspect of a leader is you need to engage with people to actually know that your leadership is working. It's not just about the mission, but it's really knowing your airmen, your guardians, and your civilians that work with you and what's on their mind. Because if they're carrying some baggage around with them, it makes it harder for them to get the mission done. And it is, as General Raymond stated in his opening comments, it's about readiness. And for all of our leaders, you got to take a little time to make sure you're looking after your airmen. And then if you look after your airmen, they'll take care of the mission. And you as a commander don't have to do it as much in that regard. It's how you balance your time to make sure you're engaging and staying in touch with your airmen and getting their feedback.
Thanks, gentlemen. There's a couple of questions that have come in about standards. I think the report mentioned that there were a number of disparities in UCMJ, in personnel actions, and career opportunities. If everybody's equal, what's the difference between that and affirmative action?
Yeah, I'll start first. This is not affirmative action. This is equal opportunity and inclusion. This is making sure this isn't a lowering of standards. This is about making sure that everybody who joins our service, who raises their hand and volunteers to join either the Air Force or the Space Force, has an equal opportunity to develop and to have the opportunities for promotion and advancement and leadership going forward. It's not lowering standards. It's about equal opportunity and inclusion.
And I'd agree with that. And I think what we were looking at as we do these reviews is to look at the criteria we use to bring folks either into the Air Force or the Space Force, to go into different career fields, to be qualified for certain career fields. There may be aspects that we are unaware of that we've had laid in that we haven't changed over a number of years. I'll use a good example. Dr. Roper just laid out some of the standards we had for height and how we design things. That was laid out in 1967. Things have changed. And so for us to be able to go back and review these periodically will help us better understand, do we have the criteria right? Is our some of our testing appropriate and actually really testing the right data? Or is this the same test we had since I was a lieutenant? Those are the things we're looking at to ensure we don't allow any of our airmen or guardians or civilians miss an opportunity because we have an outdated process of how we judge their talent. And that's the key aspect of this.
And as we're looking to, to develop and invent this new service called a Space Force, we're again, I can't thank the airmen and guardians enough for putting their voices into this, because this is helping us. This is helping inform us on building a service going forward, and we have a unique opportunity that we're starting relatively with a clean sheet of paper, and it's a relatively it's a small service that provides us some opportunities. And so on the testing part that General Brown just talked about, we've decided because we're small enough, that we're not going to have testing for promotions on the enlisted side going forward. And again, it's something that we have an opportunity to get right. And with your help in putting your voices into this, you've been very helpful in helping us inform the creation of this new service. And I want to say again, thanks very much.
I think both of you mentioned a little on the enlisted testing testing. On the enlisted promotion testing, to fix the disparity, will you be giving an unwarranted advantage to minorities or underrepresented populations based on their low test scores? Isn't this counterproductive? It's another question we've seen.
No, because we're not changing the test right now right away to go and given because you're from a diverse background that you get a bump in your score automatically just because you're diverse. What we are going to do is take a look at the test. Is the test a fair test? And that's just, on the enlisted side, but we're also taking a look at the Air Force officer qualifying test to assess that. Is that still a fair test? I don't know how, I'm not sure when the last time it's changed, but there's a review going on to do that. What we don't want to do by the same token is rip out the process we have today without a good system to put in behind it. And then we just have a bit of chaos. And so that's why in some cases, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to work through this. We want to make sure we make a good transition and have something that's going to be sustainable, not something we're going to keep, throwing out there and it's not working. And then we're not moving forward on diversity and inclusion and having the criteria that provides for all of our, in this case on the Air Force, all of our airmen to have an opportunity, and same thing on the civilian side.
And as I mentioned, because of our size enables us to do things differently. We are going to move away from testing and rely heavily on boards to do that selection at kind of the E5 and above levels. And so, but again, the information that was received in this review is really helping us inform a human capital strategy for this new service.
All right, gentlemen, we're coming up. We'll be ending here at 4:30 local time in DC. But we've also gotten a lot of questions on the actual solutions moving forward. What does the implementation plan look like? What are some actionable items for sustainable and lasting change? Over to you, gentlemen.
Well, let me jump in first and just say there's still a lot of work to do. There is a lot of work to do, and job number one is getting after the root cause. We have the data. Now we have to figure out the cause of what we're seeing in the data. And then we have laid out, and if you go to the report in Appendix A, it walks you through an action plan on how General Brown and I will continue the battle rhythm, if you will, in increments of time to get after not just the root cause, but then the meaningful change that owners of those issues will enact and get us moving in the right direction.
So what I'd add to that is if you read nothing else, I'd read the first 6 pages of the report, which highlights the issue. And then I would go back to the back part of the report and read the appendices, which hit to this particular question of the things we're doing. It lays out there's about 15 different areas that are laid out in the report that we are going to take a look at in more detail. And it lays out which part of the Air Force, which director in the Air Force here at the headquarters is taking a look at that particular area, their initial steps, and the timeline they're working towards. The other, as General Raymond described, we'll have updates. The first update will be within 60 days for us to get an assessment from the directorates on both from the Space Force and the Air Force, or where they are in their initial steps. And then the report talks about a 6-month and an annual review. My intent is actually, yes, we're going to hold it 60 days, 6 months, and a year, but I'm going to put pressure on ourselves to continue to make progress in these areas. And the last part of that is we want to make sure that we're providing you, kind of what we're doing. We want your feedback, because we can have a really good idea, but if it doesn't resonate with our airmen and our guardians and our civilians out in the field, we want to make sure it's having the impact and explain to you what we're doing, which ones we're going to be able to do a little bit faster than others, and have that dialogue as we move forward.
Speaking of dialogue, gentlemen, the last question I'm going to ask is, will there be another town hall in the near future? Major Harris asked, to allow for time to fully digest the report that came out, creating a second conversation of sorts on this.
Sure, I'm open to doing additional dialogues, and I know that Chief Bass and Chief Tobin also are interested in doing a town hall. I'll also tell you, I've just came back from the CENTCOM AOR and had some chances to sit down with small groups of airmen, and that's my intent as well. Not just the town hall like this on a Facebook Live, but also when I travel is to sit down in small groups with some of our airmen, so I can hear directly from them, because there's a lot of layers between me and them, and what I be is give them the opportunity to tell me directly, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, give me feedback to help me be a better leader and help us all be better leaders.
Yeah, I would absolutely welcome the opportunity to participate in another Facebook Live. And I also agree with General Brown. I've done small group sessions and I find those very valuable. I think the conversations are very candid and have been very informative to me. And again, I would just like to thank everybody that's having those dialogues. And I would tell you to keep it up, and I'm more than happy to and in fact would look forward to doing another session once we maybe get through the first 6 months, come up with some root cause analysis, and then first 6 months of the action planning, and then we can come back with an update. I'd welcome that opportunity.
Thank you both, gentlemen. With that, we have about 2 minutes left. What is the last message you want to leave our airmen and guardians with on this topic?
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to answer the surveys, taking the time to actually write 27,000 pages to sit in the small groups. And those are the groups that were all part of this, but I know there's thousands of small group conversations that are happening across our Air Force and our Space Force. So thank you for, just being part of the conversation. But I'd also tell you that as leaders, we cannot, the two of us cannot do this by ourselves. Yeah, the secretary, our senior enlisted, our Chief Master of the Air Force and senior enlisted advisor to the CSO, we can't do it by ourselves. It requires all of us as leaders to be part of the solution. And so I'm looking forward to working with everybody on this and holding all of ourselves accountable to make sure we're making our Air Force better, so we stay the best Air Force in the world.
Yeah, I would again end where I started, and that's the same thing, saying thank you. Your voice is heard and it matters, and it has made a difference. And I'm committed to coming to work every day, making sure that we make some meaningful change to make our force better. Again, my personal opinion is this is a readiness issue. This gets at the core of what we do as an armed service. And this is something that we will take seriously, and I will commit to you that we'll work, and I know I'm speaking for General Brown here, that General Brown and I will work tirelessly to get this right and make meaningful change. But thank you very much. And I also want to take an opportunity to say happy holidays to everybody that's out there on the net. Please take care of yourself. Stay connected in a time when it's hard to stay connected with the pandemic that we face. Please take care of yourself, take care of each other, and thanks for the opportunity to have a discussion with you today.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Happy holidays.